The End of Ponies by Short Skirts and Explosions. Chapter 1. From the Ashes. The first thing she remembered was how scared Rainbow Dash was. She could feel the blue Pegasus's panting breath underneath her wing muscles as the young filly clung, trembling, to her backside. Undaunted, Rainbow Dash flew to the two of them over the panicked sprawl of Cloudsdale, darting every which way around herds of frightened and hysterical ponies. There was a great shadow falling over the land of Equestria, as if some titanic curtain was being drawn over the noonday sun, and the Pegasi's home in the sky was the first to fall under the blight. As the chaos reached a deafening cacophony, the tiny pony buried her shaking snout into Rainbow's prismatic mane. "I don't get it," she said. "What's going on? Why is every pony so freaked out? I can't believe it. Harmony was right. She was right all along." Rainbow Dash's voice sounded strangely cold, contemplative, distant, like she was flying a million miles away from where the two of them were presently hurtling. "I wonder who else knew about this. Twilight?" "Rainbow, you're scaring me," the filly murmured. Tears welled at the edges of her eyes as she clung all the tighter to her sky-barreling protector. "Who was right about what? Where are you taking us?" As Rainbow Dash veered around the stampeding herd of rain factory workers, she daringly ignored the pony's first question and only half tackled the second. "I'm taking you somewhere safe." "Me? But what about you? Whoa!" she shrieked as Rainbow ducked low beneath a falling column of sky marble. Gasping, the little pony atop her back looked back to see an entire cloud bed dissipating in a wisp of steam. Every Pegasus that was galloping across it floundered and flailed in the sudden plunge, and all too tragically succumbed to the weight of several ivory structures overtaking them from above. Far below the clouds, where the hapless Pegasi plummeted, the green expanse of Equestria shuddered and bulged as if a serpent of epic proportions was shredding its way upwards through the surface. More screams, and the young pony turned forward once more to witness a rainbow factory imploding as 3 whole levels of cloud beds collapsed through it. Before her trembling eyes, half of Cloudsdale was crumbling into a gigantic earthbound comet. Streams of shattered rainbow patterns and marble shrapnel soared toward her vision. Before she could scream, Rainbow Dash was banking hard to the left, yelling at the youngling to hold on tight. She obeyed, and clamped her hooves around Rainbow's spine with an iron grip as the blue Pegasus spun them around, surging chunks of debris, falling droves of screaming ponies, and white-hot spurts of Cloudsdalian steam. At the end of her acrobatic sky dance, Rainbow Dash heroically soared the two of them heavenward towards the patch of brown haze beyond the last wisps of the evaporating clouds. As the clouds gave way, the brown haze turned out to be a caravan of abandoned hot air balloons conjoined about a metal-framed gondola large enough to fit 4 dozen ponies. Rainbow Dash effortlessly threaded the two of them through an open porthole in the side of the abandoned royal cargo vessel. Touching down inside, Rainbow planted the young filly on her hooves. The little pony stumbled numbly across the interior of the gondola, ushered forward by her older blue friend, until she dazedly blinked at what she was being led to, a series of dark cubicles fashioned out of an obsidian metal. "Arcane vaults?" The filly blinked and glanced confusedly up at the Pegasus. "Rainbow Dash, ponies are dying. Why did you bring me here?" "Kid, if I place my bets right, and I sure as Celestia wish I didn't have to, all of Equestria is dying. There's no place in the sky or the ground that's safe, except for here." "Why here?" "It's what Harmony told me, and so far she's been right about a bunch of stuff." Rainbow Dash's voice echoed once as she shoved them both into the hollow of one of the arcane vaults. The great dying world shrieked and howled outside the claustrophobic interior like a reversed seashell. "It all makes sense now. I can't take any chances. You're staying here, all right?" "Staying here?" the filly squeaked in disbelief. She trotted shakily around the interior, eyeing the floor, the roof, the 2 tiny windows of sickly pale sunlight growing dimmer, dimmer, dimmer. "But Rainbow Dash, what about our friends? What about my—" There was a large metal clang, and the girl gasped to find herself shut inside the box-like vault. "Rainbow Dash!" She ran up and scratched her hooves futilely against the thick black door. "Let me out! Why are you doing this?" "Because I'll be darned if I let you die!" The colorfully maned pony stared from outside a barred vent in the doorframe. She reached a hoof down and playfully ruffled the filly's hair while sporting a brave smirk. "Don't fret. I'll be back in like half an hour, tops. I gotta go find Harmony. She'll know how to fix all this." A not so stealthy gulping a lump in her throat. She has to." "Rainbow Dash, don't leave me," the filly sobbed, all her tiny weight pressed against the door. "Please, I don't want to be alone." "I'll be back, I promise. Now you promise me something. Promise me you won't leave this airship until one of us girls comes to get you." "Rainbow." "Promise me. Pinkie Pie, swear it." I swear," the filly hiccuped, fighting back her tears. "Everything's gonna work out. You'll see." Rainbow Dash's hoof let go of the filly's head as she trotted backward towards the porthole in the side of the gondola. "Seriously, kid, would I let the world be any less cool by disappearing?" A wink, a flick of the tail, and she was gone. The little pony sat there, trembling, in the dark shadow of the arcane vault, with the penumbra of light from the two opposite windows acting as her only view to an apocalyptic crescendo. For what seemed like an hour of molasses-creeping terror, she listened to the thunderous echoes of her own heartbeat. A sour tumor formed invisibly in the base of her throat. With a dry, trembling tongue, she reared herself up and started calling, mewling, Rainbow Dash's name, then Fluttershy's, then even Applejack's, and when no pony and nothing answered her foolish cries, she cleared her throat and, in a braver breath, she tried a name that she had barely come to comprehend, much less believe in. "Harmony?" It was around that very moment that a tremendous shockwave ricocheted across the roof of the world. The filly felt it hit, as the entire body of the gondola rattled like a ship dashed against a rocky shore. The pale bands of light from the opposite windows swam across the vault's interior, and the young pony realized to her horror that one or more of the balloons had exploded. The entire body of the dirigible spiraled in a suicidal plunge earthward. She was only faintly aware of a horrified little voice calling out all the names she had ever grown attached to in her abbreviated life. Several more spins later, and her young body was thrown violently towards the side of the vault, forcing her to look out the barred windows and seeing the entirety of Clydesdale falling like a bag of ivory bricks towards an equestrian countryside drenched in endless flame. Droves of screaming Pegasi fell towards the gaping maw of the burning abyss, until suddenly their airborne carcasses exploded in a hurtling wall of ash. Breathless, the filly's eyes tilted upwards to see the source of the holocaustal blast wave. As a great shadow fell over the plunging vault, she saw the sun being blotted out by a great circular phantom. It wasn't until the pull of gravity boiled her blood from the inside out that she realized that this phantom was the moon. The cold body completely eclipsed the burning one, creating a solid ring of fire for a few brief breaths, until the moon itself exploded and covered everything everywhere in one thunderous scream that masked hers. Her scarlet eyes opened wide, twitching. Ash and snow danced across the field of cloud beds, stretching dark and gray from horizon to horizon, as far as any pony could see, as far as only she could see. She sighed, her eyes thinning as they were encompassed once more by the perpetual grayness of the monochromatic world outside. A hint of moisture sprang from the trembling edges, but they cleared in a huff as the frowning pony sat up straight in the cockpit seat and flung a pair of amber-brown goggles over her optics. The adult mare reached both hoofs forward and pulled at a series of levers flanking the left and right sides of her seat, which was positioned in the center of the cramped ship. Gazing forward across an instrument panel, she focused on the altitude meter as it ticked down in a spinning scale. The gears and servos within the dashboard hissed and puttered incessantly, speaking to the mare in a language of her own design. The entire body of the cabin rocked and veered as she navigated her way through a pocket of windy turbulence. She tilted her gaze back towards the curved windows that stretched in front of the dashboard. Beyond the copper-framed translucent sheets, the flurry of ash and snow kicked up. The air was anything but calm here. A rock face had to be nearby. It was time to stop relying on the instrument panel and instead trust in gut instinct. A deep breath, and the pony reached a brown hoof up and pulled a chain link handle. A whirring noise, and a great iron boiler positioned at the very rear of the cabin hissed and billowed hotly. A series of brass pipes rattled against the curved walls of the gondola as steam throttled up through them into a series of gears that controlled the exterior rudders of the ship. The pony's hoof pulled at another chain, and a shrill whistling sound lit the foggy air as the vessel's lateral vents briefly opened. A ringing noise. The ship descended rapidly. The pony ignored the alarm and proceeded with her sharp plummet. Her brow creased above her amber goggles as she squinted hard through the mist-laden windshield, the fluttering ash outside parting every which way to make room for the ship's piercing path. The altitude meter was clicking like mad. The metal framework of the dashboard rattled and buckled. Finally, as the centripetal force of the fall gave slack to the pony's seat harness, she spotted a break in the ashen blizzard. A great black mass was surging just beyond the gray mist. She immediately reached her snout up and yanked a chain link handle while simultaneously shoving two levers back with a pair of strong hooves. Every dangling supply net and rattling cage inside the gondola swayed forward as the Zeppelin came to a hovering stop, then gently fluttered down toward a granite cliff jutting out from the mist like a great black knife. Slowly, the pony piloted the dirigible downward 1 meter at a time, then 1/2 meter at a time. Then she cut all power and simply let the thing naturally drift until there was an inevitable thump against the rock. In one motion, she unclasped all of her safety harnesses and dashed towards the port side of the vessel. Clad in a brown leather armor from snout to flank, the agile pony raised her head towards a valve and grasped its handle in her teeth. With a tightly held breath, she cranked and cranked and cranked the cylindrical device forward until, through the edge of her squinting vision, she saw a giant mechanical claw stretching icily outwards from beyond the leftmost side of the great yawning windshield. Once the claw was within reach of the rocky cliff, she let go of the valve and in the next breath pulled at two hooks positioned right next to it. A hissing of steam and hydraulics, and she watched in deadpan satisfaction as the metal fingers of the claw clamped down tightly onto the ledge of the cliff. Locking the fingers in place with a pulled lever, she then trotted to the starboard side of the ship and performed the same feat, so that an identical claw stretched outward from the right and similarly clasped the mountainous promontory, successfully anchoring the vessel in place. A solid breath, and the pony trotted towards a supply locker on the port side. Instead of a handle, there was a black stone within which a glowing rune was etched. Reaching towards a workbench, she grabbed a leather bracelet within, which 6 severed horns were interwoven with fine stitches. After sliding the multicolored band onto her right hoof, she cleared her throat and solidly throated one word. Him! One of the many horns on the bracelet shimmered in a brief purple haze. Immediately, the glowing rune on the supply locker faded to black, and the hulking metal cabinet opened with a resounding metal ring. Reaching into the locker, the pony grabbed and shouldered another thick layer of armor. After donning the dull brown material, she then snatched 2 sets of saddlebags, followed by a pair of lanterns which she yoked over her neck. Once suited, she procured a long collapsible cylinder of brass fused to a wooden stock. She then made sure to grab 2 hollow metal magazines filled to the brim with faintly glowing runestones. Afterward, she slid the brass rifle into a sheath on the right flank of her armored shell and the magazines into the left side compartments. Finally, she grabbed a tiny jar fitted with a runed cap. The container was custom made, as was everything else on her and around her. So adequately geared, the pony took a few back trots from the closed supply locker and grunted a different word into the air. Hinnim. The rune over the middle of the cabinet glowed once again, locking the doors with a magical seal. The pony made one final check of her instruments, lowered the temperature on the boiler in the back, extinguished the lanterns lining the interior of the cabin, and made her way down a winding brass staircase towards the dark-lit hangar floor below. Strolling past several tables of chemistry equipment and engineering tools, she nonchalantly approached a wide, yawning aperture of the copper plates positioned towards the lower bow of her ship. "Hem!" the mayor uttered once more. The circular door opened from the inside out, its shiny metal hull pouring a gray spotlight of misty haze across her weathered features. A deep breath, and she reached a hoof up to the side of her pilot's cap, dragging a cloth mask down so that it covered her mouth and snout. A flurry of bone-chillingly cold wind dotted with snow and ash, and she was greeted by the foggy wail of a dead world beyond. Trotting forward, she hopped down onto the black rock of the cliff face, her brass horseshoes nearly slipping on the polished obsidian. She hissed a muffled curse under her breath, groaned inwardly, and marched on past the gently swaying hull of her anchored ship and the faded letters of its name that had been half-heartedly sprayed thereupon. Harmony. Pausing briefly to measure the direction and intensity of the wind, the pony reached a hoof up and parted the mask from her lips just long enough to throat, "Hyonir!" The entrance to the Harmony hangar closed like cat's eye. "Win'em!" 6 glowing runes positioned around the closed aperture suddenly lit up, encasing the body of the entrance in a thin haze of purple shielding. The pony trotted forward, marching across the glassy black surface of the mountainside. Her clopping hooves were mere pin drops in an endless howl of wind and snow. Above her thickly armored neck the sky swam infinitely across a ceiling of dark gray clouds, and beyond that soulless mesh the pony knew only to expect the sputtering hint of starlight, or something halfway like it. Soon the shrieking wind drowned away as she grew more and more distant from the Harmony and closer toward her goal. It was a haunting silence, like suddenly being at the bottom of a magical well with no echoes. But this hardly surprised her. After all, she had been there before, long ago. It took barely 200 meters of trotting before she found the first signs of the ruins. The softly falling snow gave way to a great white mass, an overturned cylindrical tower that had fallen thunderously on its crumbling side countless years ago. Emblazoned across the shattered stalk of the lopsided spire was the faded image of a bronze sun, splotched with ash and rusted streaks of long-lost life. This same image blotted the sides of several more buildings, some collapsed, others in a perpetual state of decay, as the grand skeleton of a deceased city exposed itself coldly before her. The pony had reached her destination, the elevated, unclimbable ruins of Canterlot. She pressed on, in search of her target.